Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome everyone. Assalamu alaikum. Today we're going to start our series on the Sufi of the week, but it probably won't be every week because it requires a certain amount of research and studying to get all the appropriate information. So it may be Sufi of the every week, every second week, or we'll see. And then in the intermediary weeks, we'll cover general topics because that you can talk about, I can talk about for a long period of time without actually researching it. Okay, so Abu Yazid al-Bastami. Now, one of my students said he had never heard of him, and I'm not surprised because he's not well known like Ibn al-Arabi and Jalaluddin Rumi. He's much less well known, but he is known by the students of Sufism. And Abu Yazid al-Bastami is really very special. He's the Sufi's Sufi. Okay. So, in the case of Ibn al-Arabi, it can be confusing. His teachings and reading him can be confusing because there's a lot of philosophy and it's not clear what his actual experience is and what his philosophical elaborations are. So much so that in Damascus, most of the shuyukhs told their murids not even to try to read him. Too difficult, too confusing, and you can make the wrong conclusion. He was a very high Sufi, but his way of expressing himself is very complex at best. We'll cover him nevertheless because he's a very important figure, Ibn al-Arabi. Westerners love him, especially Western intellectuals. They have a whole group of his students at Oxford in England, in the Ibn al-Arabi Society, and they've written books on him, but he's complicated, not easy to understand for those who have tried to read it. Jalaluddin Rumi is popular everywhere, but he's also a poet, and he's also a developer of meditation techniques like the whirling dervishes, so his message can get also lost amidst the poetry. But Abu Yazid is a pure Sufi. As I said before, the Sufi. He's the Michael Jordan of Sufism. Or if you prefer hockey, he's the Wayne Gretzky of Sufism. Or if you prefer soccer, which is certainly not my case, he's the Lionel Messi of Sufism, etc., etc., etc. You can choose your sport, and you can find one of those people who are at the top. How do they call them now in the United States? The GOATs, greatest of all times. Like they say about Tom Brady also, the GOAT, the greatest. So Abu Yazid Bastami, or Abu Yazid al-Bastami, is one of those, but in Sufism. So we have a lot to learn from him. He was born in Bastami, which is in northeastern Iran or Persia. You'll notice if you start studying the history of Sufism that most of the great Sufis, not all, but most of the great Sufis come either from the east, which is Persia and the Caucasus, and those areas, like Shah Naqshband from Samarkand, or from the far west, like Ibn al-Arabi was born in Andalusia, and Abu Hassan al-Shadili also from either Andalusia or northern Morocco, I forget. But the great Sufis, most of them were from either the far east or the far west of the Islamic Empire. Why might that not be? Well, maybe the people in the middle were more orthodox, more attached to the outward sciences, more attached to the whatever, the official line, And these people from the east and from the west are farther out, higher in a spiritual sense, not necessarily in a virtue sense. So Abu Yazid's grandfather was a Zoroastrian, the fire worshippers, but he converted at some point. And his mother was a very pious lady. His father died early in his life. You'll find that many of the great scholars and Sufis, their father died early. That says something about fathers. But anyway, but they have very devoted mothers who pay a lot of attention to them. And Abu Yazid was very attached to his own mother until he asked for permission to leave, which she granted, but he wouldn't have left if he didn't have her permission. So we're not going to be able to obviously cover the whole story or do what they call in America now a deep dive into Abu Yazid and his life. By the way, one of the criterion for these seminars is that someone has taken the trouble to write a book about these people. And there's only one book I know of about Abu Yazid, and it's written by an old friend of mine, Muhammad Abdul Rab. He's a Bangladeshi guy who went the academic route and was teaching at one of the Sejeps, the junior colleges here. And he was a friend of ours following another sheikh, Fadla Khairi, I think his name was. But he wrote a pretty decent book. It was part of his doctoral thesis also in comparative religion on Abu Yazid al-Bastami. I don't know of any other books in English, but there's a lot of details here. But we're going to be based mostly on the book by Fariduddin Attar called Muslim Saints and Mystics. This is the book. And I recommend this to anyone who wants to know about some of the great Sufis. It's a series of biographies and statements by some of the great Sufis, and Abu Yazid is there in the middle. So let's hear what he has to say. Oh, okay, I don't think I made this point clear enough. Abu Yazid is called the Sultan al-Arifin. Have you heard that term? Yeah. Okay, the Sultan of Arifin means that he was the king of the Arifs. Now, Arifs comes from the verb arafat, to know, but they're not people who have general knowledge. The Arifin are people who have experiential knowledge of Allah, both as other than them and as themselves. Okay, so we're going to hear Abu Yazid talking about this. He's not talking about Allah, God, in abstractions. He's talking about Allah in actual experience, and that is the goal of all of Sufism. As I mentioned in one of my previous tapes about Sufism, the goal is nothing other, and people will say all kinds of intellectual things. Sufism is about adab, and Sufism is about good behavior, and Sufism is about practicing the Sharia. No. Those are all great things, but Sufism is about the experiential knowledge of Allah as other than us, what the Hindus call dualistic perspective, and experience of God as our very selves, the unicity of God, which the Muslims call Tawheed, but usually they don't have a clue. It's just a concept of unity. But Abu Yazid has more than a concept. He has the reality. So let's listen to what he has to say. I gazed upon God with the eye of certainty. Okay, there's 3 stages of certainty. Do you know what the 3 stages are?
Yes. Knowing, seeing, and experience.
Do you know what the Arabic is?
I forgot.
Okay, so we have ilm al-yaqeen, the knowledge of certainty. We know that God is there. We know it. you'll see the distinction here. Then there's Ain al-Yaqin, the eye of certainty. You've seen the certainty. And then there's the Haq al-Yaqin, you have now become the certainty. Haq al-Yaqin. That's when you're fused, your consciousness is fused with the divine consciousness. You have merged in the essence of Allah. So I gazed upon Allah, God, with the eye of certainty. So this is Allah as other than Him. After that, He advanced me to the degree of independence from all creatures. Okay, that's an interesting station also. So He doesn't need creatures, everything comes to Him from Allah. And illuminated me with His light. Light is one of the signs of the presence of Allah. Nur. Allahu nur as-samawati wal ard. Allah is the light of all the heavens and the earth, revealing to me the wonders of His secrets and manifesting to me the grandeur of His He-ness, meaning His essence, His presence, His wajh, to use the Arabic word, His face. Then from God I gazed upon myself. From God, I gazed upon myself. Okay? So now, this is the fana. Now he's God looking at himself. Okay? It's also one of the aims of our Sufi practice, to merge in the divine consciousness and then see yourself from the divine perspective. I have seen that. It's an amazing experience. You're not you anymore. You're the divine looking at you. May Allah give us more and more of that kind of experience. It's amazing. I gazed upon myself and considered well the secrets and attributes of myself. My light was darkness. So our individual selves are darkness. My grandeur shrank to very meanness beside God's grandeur. We're nothing. Like the famous joke of the three people at the mosque, the muezzin, the imam, and the caretaker. And the muezzin says to the imam, or the imam says to the muezzin, I'm nothing. And the muezzin says, I'm nothing too. And when the caretaker says, me too, I'm nothing, the muezzin looks at the imam who says, look who thinks he's nothing. Like being nothing is a high station, but really being nothing is a high station, not fake humility, not riyah. So, my grandeur shrank to the very meanness beside God's grandeur. Okay. That's true humility. No hubris. Now, we encounter hubris all around us. Bill Gates is going to solve the illnesses of the world through vaccines, or stop climate warming by geoengineering the clouds. The latest example of hubris, and I know there are a lot of people who are fans, but Trump, of course, is full of hubris. Politics is important, by the way. This is a little aside. We'll get back to Abu Yazid because he wasn't interested. But we can understand a lot of things, especially about man's limitations, by following politics. So now and politics are part of the biopsychosocio-spiritual model that I keep teaching, and I realize the politics are part of the sociological dimension of this model. So most of my teachers were against us having any interest in politics except for Sheikh Nazim, and trying to think if there were any others, but I found, for example, when I became a Muslim, I have to understand the politics of the Muslim community, or I don't know how to navigate it. I can't deal with these people. I have to know who are the Wahhabis, who are the Tablighis, who are the Ikhwanis. Then I have a chance. But if I'm in total ignorance and say I don't want to know anything about politics, I'm going to mess up the communication. Absolutely sure. Okay, so in politics you learn about hubris. It's the foil learning. You learn about what you don't want to be. Okay, so all of you railing against Trump, try to be the opposite. All of you railing against Biden, well, also try to be the opposite. Be open, accept your limitations. My glory besides God's glory became vainglory. Anyone who thinks they're great, look at the great things I've done. You know, whether it's an athlete or an actor. Look at me, I've made billions of dollars, I'm great. No. None of us are great. You know, Muhammad Ali was asked if he had any understanding about why he got this terrible Parkinsonism at the end of his life. And he said, I think I got it. They said, what? He said, I kept saying, I am the greatest. But actually, I'm not. Allah is the greatest, and this is insulting. You know, in the Ten Commandments, we don't have quite the same thing in Islam, but it says, do not use the name of your Lord in vain. So don't pretend to have the qualities that Allah has. You can't. And Abu Yazid was experiencing there with Allah, always purity, here always foulness. If you remember Solomon in Ecclesiastes, all is vanity. And he was right. Look at yourself. All of us. And we'll see that all is vanity. We don't want to go there. When I looked again, I saw my being by Allah's light. Okay, zap, his being is no longer there. It's outside of him. He's now looking through the eyes of Allah, like in the famous hadith, where you become the eyes through which Allah sees and the ears through which Allah hears. He's there. My being, I saw my being by Allah's light. I realized that my glory was of His grandeur, and everything we have is from Him. If you have a good mind, it's from Allah. It's not from you. If you're athletic and really good at sports, it's a gift from Allah. When I was, on a personal note, just before I became Muslim, I was wandering around in Jerusalem, and the first place I started, according to my birth nature, I started with the Jewish seminaries, the yeshivas there. And I went to visit at some point, this Hasidic rabbi. His name was Reb Gedalia Koenig, a very pious and obviously wise man. I wasn't really happy with Judaism, and I left in a few months. But he looked at me, and a statement I will always remember, and he used my original Hebrew name, and he said, Yosef? I said, yes. He said, I see you have the capacity for knowledge. So he saw that there was some brain cells working there, which isn't the case in all people, unfortunately. Right? So he said, but remember, whatever you know, whatever you learn, it's only a drop in the ocean of the knowledge of Hashem, which is Allah in the Hebrew language. Whoa, that was very powerful. Okay, so we are nothing in that sense. Not nothing, because Allah created us for something. But compared to Allah's magnificence, we're very little. Whatsoever I did, I was able to do through His, Allah's, omnipotence. Whatever the eye of my physical body perceived, it perceived through Him. I gazed with the eye of justice and reality, that's the eye of Allah. All my worship proceeded from God. So the fact that we want to follow the religion or follow the Sufi path also comes from God. You can't motivate yourself on your own. You can't love on your own. I've argued with people about this before. You can't love, it's fake. If you say, oh, I love you, love is a gift from God to your heart. And it's a gift of God's love, actually. That's why people are, I realized that recently, that's why people are so attached to love. Because it might be the only experience of God that they have as love in their hearts. All my worship proceeded from God, not from me, and I had supposed that it was I who worshipped him. It was he who worshipped him, but only because Allah let him. Then he stood, and now here we get into the heavy-duty mysticism. Then he stitched up my eye, not to be the means of seeing, and so that I might not see. And he instructed the gaze of my eye in the root of the matter, the he-ness of himself. So he's not seeing himself anymore, now he's seeing Allah. He annihilated me from my own being. Fana. There's no ego left, no individual self, and made me to be everlasting through his own everlastingness. So he's outside of time. And he glorified me. He disclosed to me his own selfhood, the essence of God, unjostled by my own existence. So God, the one truth, increased in me reality. Through God, I gazed on God, and I beheld God in reality. Now you'll find things somewhat similar in some of the near-death experiences that people have had when they gaze upon God, and some of them even fuse with the being of God. But this man did it on a regular basis. So, let's read a little further. When I reached unicity, okay, it's probably a translation of Tawheed, that was the first moment that I gazed upon unity. For many years I ran in that valley on the feet of understanding till I became a bird. You see, he waxes poetic. Whose body was of oneness, whose wings were of everlastingness. So he's having all the qualities of God. I kept flying in the firmament of unconditionalness. When I had vanished from the things created, I spoke. There's an awesome one. Okay. Then I lifted up my head from the valley of lordship. Okay. Rububiyah. Lordship is, you recognize who is your Lord. I quaffed a cup, the thirst for which I never slaked in all eternity. Okay, now we're getting poetic. Then for 30,000 years I flew in the expanse of his unicity, Tawheed. And for 30,000 years more I flew in divinity, the watch of Allah. And for 30,000 years more I flew in singularity. Wow. When 90,000 years had come to the end, I saw Abu Yazid, and all that I saw, all was I. Okay, now, it's pretty heavy-duty stuff. And we're not going to get there quickly, but it's nice to hear from someone who's been there, seen it, and tries to put it into words, some of these very high mystical experiences. Now, Abu Yazid was a hardcore guy, and I'll give you an example. So he had a disciple, and his disciple, you see the difference with nowadays. His disciple was already a pretty accomplished ascetic who prayed every night through the night and fasted almost every day. And he said to Abu Yazid, Master, today is 30 years that I've kept constant fast. So he fasted every day. This is not the sunnah. We were told not to do that. But anyway, these people are radicals. By night too I pray so that I never sleep at all. Yet I discover no trace in myself of this knowledge of which you speak. So this is a lesson for us also. We can do all these practices, and yet we don't have the Abu Yazid experience. Because ultimately, no matter how good our practice is, no matter how well informed, how wise, the result is from Allah. subhanahu wa ta'ala. The result is not from our practices. Okay? So here's a guy who's staying up every night to pray, who fasts every day, and nothing is happening. And Abu Yazid, he wasn't going to coddle him. He wasn't a helicopter parent. If for 300 years, Abu Yazid said, you fast by day and pray, but you'll never realize one atom of this discourse. So he's telling him, you're wasting your time, essentially. Why? Asked the disciple. Because you're veiled by your own self. Okay, there's ego there. So you can't realize it. So what is the remedy? The disciple asked him. And Abu Yazid said, you won't accept it. I will, said the man. Okay, said Abu Yazid. You see, these guys were tough. Then this very hour go, shave your beard, which was, whoa, you couldn't do that in those days. Nowadays, 2/3 of the Muslims are shaving their beards. It's tough for them. But it's against the religion, against the sin. Shave your beard and your hair, take off your fancy clothes and wear a loincloth of goat's wool, hang a bag of nuts around your neck and go to the marketplace, collect all the children you can and tell them, I will give a nut to anyone who slaps me. These guys weren't fooling around. You know, I read this, go all around the city in the same way, especially to places where people know you. That is your cure. Subhanallah, la ilaha illallah. The disciples said, if an infidel uttered that formula, a non-believer said la ilaha illallah, Abu Bakr said, he would become a believer. But by uttering the same formula, you become a non-believer, a mushrik. How so? Demanded the disciple. Because you counted yourself too good to be able to do as I said. You have become a polytheist. You use this formula to express your own importance, not to glorify God. So he's asking him basically to belittle himself, humiliate himself, shame himself, and then he would get to the station. And the murid can't do it. This is, there's quite a few of these stories in Sufi history where the teacher asked the murid, go and beggar someone who was an aristocrat, high up in society, go into the marketplace and beggar's clothes and beg for your daily bread, And many of them did it because they were sincere. When I compare that to nowadays, it's kind of discouraging. Because nowadays you ask someone, take off one evening from your work, your precious work, take off one evening to do the practices with us, and people won't do it. Tell your wife or your partner, whoever it is, your father, one evening a week you have to give to your spiritual practices, and most people can't do it. So you ask them something relatively minor, and they don't want to disrupt their life. Go 45 minutes to the place where we meet. Oh, it's too far. Now I understand what Mashur al-Haddad said when he said, people can't carry the Sufi way nowadays. They just don't have the himma, the motivation. So we ask small things and most people won't do it. But Abu Yazid was asking something a lot greater. Hatim the Deaf, he's another great Sufi, by the way, said to his disciples, whoever of you on the day of resurrection does not intercede for the inhabitants of hell, he is not one of my disciples. So he's teaching them about compassion. This was reported to Abu Yazid. I say, declared Abu Yazid, that he is my disciple who stands on the brink of hell and takes by the hand everyone being conveyed to hell and dispatches him to heaven and then enters hell in his place. Compassion. Like our Prophet ﷺ wakes up on the Day of Judgment, what is the first thing that he says?
Ummati.
Doesn't say, where is my wife? How's my health? Where's the Where's the Islamic treasury? Astaghfirullah. He says, Ummati, how's my community doing? And we all have to think that way. How are the people around you doing? Do any of them need help? Do any of them need financial help? Do any of them need physical help? Do any of them need simply encouragement? Okay, this is the right way, the Sufi way, the Muslim way to think. Fana. The first time I entered the holy house, stated Abu Yazid, I saw the holy house. This is the Kaaba. The second time I entered it, I saw the Lord of the house. MashaAllah. So he's seeing Allah through the house. The third time, I saw neither the house nor the Lord of the house. Fana. He's not there anymore. By this, Abu Yazid meant I became lost in Allah. Only divine consciousness. No longer Kaaba, no longer the owner of Kaaba, the divine consciousness, the one absolute reality. So that I knew nothing. Had I seen at all, I would have seen Allah. A man came to the door of Abu Yazid and called out, "Whom are you seeking?" We'll end with this little story and maybe have some conclusion. "Who are you seeking?" asked Abu Yazid. Someone comes to his door. "Abu Yazid," replied the man. "You poor wretch," said Abu Yazid. "I've been seeking Abu Yazid for 30 years and can't find a trace or token of him." So he had lost his sense of individual self. This is a very high station, maybe a scary one. So I won't ask that we get it right away unless we're prepared for it. This was reported to Dhunun al-Misri, another great Sufi that we'll talk about. And he commented, "Allah have mercy on my brother Abu Yazid. He is lost with the company of those who are lost in Allah." May we be of those who are lost in Allah in the right way. We can still do our work in the world, but our true consciousness is now merged with the divine consciousness, and we're able to use a modernistic word, channel the divine mercy and love and light in our lives, and then it should be visible, and even some relatively obscured people will be able to see it. Inshallah, may Allah grant us this, may He grant us a high station in this world and in the afterworld. I mean, grant us to be true servants of His message, of which Abu Yazid Bastami is one of those true ones. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun ala mursalin walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.